Have you ever imagined that one day, right inside the very house you poured a lifetime of sweat and tears into, your own son and daughter-in-law would show up at the door, locksmith in tow, and calmly say, "We already have the power of attorney. Hand over the keys, this house belongs to us now." That's right. It wasn't a nightmare. It was the brutal reality for Eleanor Brooks, a 72-year-old widow from Monterey, California. Her $6.5 million oceanfront villa, the place she and her late husband laid brick by brick, the balcony overlooking the Pacific, the sacred ground of family memories, suddenly became the prize her loved ones schemed to take for themselves. For the past 3 years, Eleanor had spent no less than $86,000 keeping her son Daniel and his brand new wife Kylie afloat. Rent checks, groceries, car repairs, even Kylie's dazzling wedding gown, she covered it all. Every single bill was paid with a mother's love. She thought it was her duty, her responsibility. What she never realized was that to them, she was never family. She was just an endless cash machine. The cruelest cut came on the very day a mother should be smiling in the front row her only son's wedding. Instead, Eleanor's name was crossed off the guest list. A VIP's only event, as Kylie sneered. And once the celebration faded, the couple turned their sights on Eleanor's last sanctuary, her home. Now think about it. A 72-year-old widow, alone, with nothing left but her house as her final refuge. What would you do if your own flesh and blood pushed you to the edge? Would you hand over the keys in silence, trading dignity for a false sense of peace? Or would you stand tall for the first time in your life and say the one thing that could leave them speechless? You want this house? Fine. But first, you'll meet my conditions. From that moment on, the story was no longer about sacrifice. It became a battle for self-respect, for dignity, and for a mother who finally realized the cash machine had to shut down. Eleanor pulled the heavy wooden door of her oceanfront villa shut. She stood still for a few seconds, listening to the crashing waves outside, once a comforting reminder that this was her sanctuary, the place filled with family laughter. But tonight, the sound felt harsh, like a warning that another storm was coming. She walked into the dining room. The long walnut table was buried under bills, notebooks, and faded receipts. The golden glow of the chandelier poured directly onto a number she had underlined again and again. $86,800. It wasn't just money. It was 3 years of her final youth drained away, motherly love reduced to a cold ledger. She whispered into the empty room, as if speaking to her late husband. "Harold, I raised him. I gave him everything. And in the end, what am I to him? Nothing but a mindless cash machine." Just then, the phone rang sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. Daniel's name lit up the screen. She answered. His voice was slow, strained, as if forcing calm. "Mom, about today." Kylie lost her temper. "But you know, we just want to settle down. That house is going to be mine anyway. Why not let us move in early?" Eleanor closed her eyes. Her hand trembled, but her voice came out steady and cold. "Son, inheritance comes after death, and I'm still alive." On the other end, silence. Then Kylie snatched the phone, her tone sharp as steel. "You're making this harder than it has to be. Don't forget we have power of attorney. If you don't cooperate, we'll use the law to take what's rightfully ours." Eleanor let out a dry, brittle laugh that echoed through the empty kitchen. "The law? Fine. Then I'll see you in court." She hung up, collapsing into the chair. Her heart raced, but her eyes burned with new fire. For years she had been soft, yielding, giving Daniel and Kylie everything they asked for. But tonight, something inside her ignited. She was done being invisible, done being an endless ATM. It was time to reclaim her dignity. The very next morning, Eleanor walked into the office of Maya Chen, an attorney specializing in elder protection. The sunlit room glowed as Maya listened intently, her sharp eyes following every detail. When Eleanor finished, Maya nodded firmly. "Mrs. Brooks, what you've experienced is financial abuse within your own family. Trust me, you're not alone. The key now is to cut off every single money flow to them and set clear legal boundaries." Eleanor pressed her lips together, her hands clenched, but her voice was resolute. "I've given in for far too long. It ends now." Maya laid out a plan. Cancel every automatic transfer, change the locks, install security cameras, and most importantly, draft a no-claim agreement that would strip Daniel and Kylie of any rights to the villa. That afternoon, Eleanor returned home with a thick folder of documents pressed against her chest. She stepped onto the balcony, staring out at the vast Pacific. The wind whipped through her silver hair, but she no longer felt the chill. Instead, a fierce determination surged inside her, like the waves crashing below. This time, she was ready to fight, to the very end. 2 days after meeting with Maya, Eleanor felt her oceanfront villa had changed. The brand new locks gleamed on every door. Security cameras blinked red like silent, watchful eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerless. Instead, she felt secure, in control. That morning, as she brewed her coffee, a knock echoed at the door. Eleanor opened it to find Daniel and Kylie. They hadn't come alone. Beside them stood a sharply dressed man in a tailored suit, leather briefcase in hand, a polite smile masking cold eyes. "This is Attorney Victor Sloan," Kylie announced triumphantly. "He's here to help you straighten out the property paperwork." Eleanor stood tall, her gaze calm. "My property doesn't need anyone to straighten it out." Victor's smile thinned. His voice was smooth, measured. "Mrs. Brooks, your son and daughter-in-law are only looking out for you. At your age, not everyone is fit to manage a multi-million-dollar estate. I strongly advise you to consider transferring responsibility to them before things become difficult." Eleanor's grip tightened on the doorframe. Her chest pounded, but her voice rang firm. "I'm sharp enough to know when someone's trying to rob me." The air snapped with tension. Daniel stared at the ground, unable to meet his mother's eyes. Kylie smirked with open defiance. After a few sharp exchanges, the trio left, their footsteps fading, leaving Eleanor standing in the hallway, eyes blazing with resolve. That very afternoon, she relayed everything to Maya. The attorney nodded knowingly. "I expected this. They'll likely file for an emergency guardianship, claiming you're incapable of handling your finances. We need to move faster than they do." The next day, Eleanor met with Dr. Raj Patel, a neurologist, for cognitive testing. In a soft blue office, Eleanor sat upright, answering every question, every exercise with razor-sharp clarity, sorting numbers, recalling stories, managing hypothetical finances. She passed them all. Even Dr. Patel raised his brows in surprise. When the exam ended, he smiled warmly. "Mrs. Brooks, your results are above average for 72. No cognitive decline whatsoever. I'll write a formal report." Eleanor nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. Relief washed over her, not because she had ever doubted herself, but because now she had a weapon to fight the accusations she knew were coming. That evening, she sat on the balcony, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The waves still roared, but they no longer sounded like warnings. Now, they were encouragement pushing her forward. She remembered the words she once hurled at her daughter-in-law. "You want this house? Fine. But first, meet my conditions." It wasn't just a challenge. It had become a line in the sand, the divide between the weak, forgiving past and the fierce, unyielding present. Eleanor knew the storms ahead would be fiercer still. Daniel and Kylie would not give up easily. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had Maya. She had Dr. Patel. And above all, she had herself finally awakened after decades of unconditional sacrifice. On a cloudy Monday morning, Eleanor received a thick envelope from the mailman. He simply nodded and walked away, leaving her standing frozen at the gate. Inside was a stack of densely printed pages, signed at the bottom by Victor Sloan. It was a notice of an emergency guardianship petition. Daniel and Kylie had filed it with the county court, accusing her of being incapable of managing her estate, vulnerable to outside influence, and in need of family control over her finances. Eleanor's hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. All her life, she had managed everything, caring for her husband through illness, raising her son, paying off the debts that secured this villa, and now, her own flesh and blood dared to write that she was no longer competent. She gripped the papers tightly, exhaling hard to steady herself. They want war? Then war it is. That afternoon, she met Maya at the law office. The attorney flipped through the petition, eyes sharp with determination. "I predicted this would happen, but we have the advantage. Dr. Patel's medical report will be our key evidence, and I've already contacted members of the community who are ready to testify on your behalf." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt she had real allies. The court date arrived faster than she expected. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with people. Daniel sat beside Kylie, both dressed neatly, feigning worry. As Eleanor walked in with Maya, she saw her son's eyes dart away. Kylie, however, kept her signature smug smile. Inside, tension filled the air. Judge Alvarez, a stern, middle-aged man, presided from the bench. The hearing began. Victor Sloan rose, voice booming with authority. "Your Honor, my clients, Daniel Brooks and his wife, only wish to protect his mother. Mrs. Eleanor has repeatedly shown signs of financial confusion and susceptibility to outside influence. With a multi-million-dollar estate at risk, she is a prime target for exploitation. Therefore, we request that the court grant immediate guardianship to my clients." Eleanor sat motionless, her hands clasped tight, her eyes locked on Victor's moving lips. Inside, she burned. When it was their turn, Maya stood, placing a thick folder on the table. "Your Honor, this is the medical report from neurologist Dr. Raj Patel, concluding that Mrs. Brooks is fully competent, with memory and cognition above average for her age. In addition, here are bank records proving that over the past 3 years, Mrs. Brooks has transferred more than $86,000 to her son and daughter-in-law. Does that look like incompetence or the generosity of a mother taken advantage of?" A ripple swept through the courtroom. The judge frowned, flipping through the documents. Maya pressed on, her voice unwavering. "We also have testimony from neighbors and community members, all confirming that Mrs. Brooks remains active, lucid, and independent. The plaintiffs have provided nothing but speculation." Eleanor drew a deep breath. She knew the moment had come. All her life, she had avoided confrontation, especially with her son. But this time, silence would cost her not just her home, but the rest of her future. She leaned toward Maya, whispering, "Let me speak for myself." Eleanor rose to her feet. Her whole body trembled not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. The courtroom fell silent. Dozens of eyes locked on her. The judge, the attorneys, the spectators, and Daniel and Kylie. She drew a deep breath, planted her hands firmly on the table for balance, and began to speak. "Your Honor, I am not a perfect person. I am old, my gray hair proves that. But my mind is still sharp. I remember every single dollar I have given away. 3 years, a total of $86,800. That was not confusion. That was love." She paused, her gaze fixed on her son. Daniel stared at the floor, his shoulders quivering. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "I paid their rent. Month after month, I bought their groceries, their gifts, even my daughter-in-law's wedding gown. I believed that was my duty as a mother, but today, they stand here accusing me of being incompetent, of losing my memory. Your Honor, that is not protection. That is betrayal." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor pointed toward the stack of documents on the table. "These are the records. Bills, receipts, every cent accounted for. If I were truly senile, how could I have kept track in such detail? How could I sit here and recall each number so clearly?" She turned to Kylie, her voice breaking yet icy cold. "My daughter-in-law told me their wedding was VIPs only. I was not considered family. Yet days later, they showed up demanding the keys to my $6.5 million home. They said it was to take care of me. No, Your Honor, they were never taking care of me. They were taking care of their bank account." Eleanor's fist tightened, her eyes glistening but unwavering. "I have stayed silent too long. I let them believe I was nothing but an endless ATM. But today, I will say it out loud. That machine is broken. I will not pay another cent. I will not surrender anymore. I am the owner of this house, the woman who built it with my husband, and I will not let anyone take it from me." Her voice rang out, echoing against the wooden walls of the courtroom. A heavy silence followed, powerful and unshakable. Judge Alvarez studied her intently, flipping again through Dr. Patel's report. Beside her, Maya gave a small nod, lips pressed tight as if holding back a smile. Victor Sloan tried to cut in, his voice faltering. "Your Honor, we believe Mrs. Brooks is simply overcome with emotion." But the judge raised a hand, silencing him. He turned to Daniel. "Do you have anything to say after what your mother has just spoken?" Daniel lifted his head. His eyes were red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Kylie tugged at his arm, scowling, but Daniel sat frozen, lowering his gaze once more. In that instant, Eleanor knew she had already won, not just in the courtroom, but within her own heart. She had finally stood tall, breaking decades of silence, and spoken for herself. The courtroom hung in silence. The ticking of the wall clock marked every tenth second. Judge Alvarez tapped his gavel lightly, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on Eleanor. His voice was deep and firm. After reviewing all the evidence, testimony, and medical reports, the court hereby denies the petition for emergency guardianship. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks is fully competent to manage her own finances and property. The gavel struck down with a crack, like thunder shattering a stormy sky. Eleanor closed her eyes as a single tear rolled down her cheek, this time not from humiliation or anger, but from sheer relief. She had won. Across the aisle, Kylie shot to her feet, face flushed red, muttering curses under her breath. Daniel sat frozen, his hands clenched together. For a brief moment, his eyes met his mother's, then darted away. There was nothing left to justify, nothing left to hold on to. Victor Sloan quietly gathered his papers, his face heavy with defeat. He knew the case had collapsed. The baseless accusations, the staged witnesses, all exposed for what they were. What remained was the truth. A mother exploited to the breaking point, who still found the strength to defend her dignity. As Eleanor stepped out of the courthouse, the Monterey sea breeze whipped through her silver hair. She lifted her face, inhaling the salty air. For the first time in years, she felt free. Maya placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You did it. And not just for yourself. You spoke up for so many others too." Eleanor nodded. A new resolve burned inside her. Protecting the villa was only the beginning. She had already contacted a nonprofit, pledging part of her money to help other seniors suffering from financial abuse at the hands of their own families. She would turn her pain into strength and use it to shield others. That night, in the quiet of her home, Eleanor sat on the balcony. The ocean still roared, but to her, it was no longer a warning. It was a song of freedom. She placed a photo of Harold, her late husband, in front of her and whispered, "Harold, I kept our home, but more importantly, I kept myself. I am no longer an ATM. I am Eleanor Brooks, and I am free." She smiled, a smile she hadn't felt in years. Dear friends, Eleanor's story is not just a family tragedy. It's a reminder. Love must never be confused with exploitation. We can be generous, we can sacrifice, but we must also draw boundaries. Without them, love becomes chains. If you've witnessed or lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. I want to hear your voice. Let others know they are not alone. And if you believe no mother or father should ever be treated like a bottomless wallet, hit like and share this video. By doing so, you'll help others realize they too have the right to say enough, just as Eleanor did. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping, emotional, and powerful stories in the Revenge Stories series. Because sometimes, the real price isn't money. It's forcing a betrayer to face the truth. You are no longer their victim.